Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. 3 teams remain at Masters Toronto. 1 team can only win the tournament. G2 Esports, though, straight on a plane back to North America. Loads of reaction last night to G2, falling short of Fnatic in very controversial fashion indeed. Boostio slamming them on the timeline as a result. Lots of drama again about this team coming so close, winning everything in the Americas, turning up to the international tournament, and it still doesn't go to plan. What went on yesterday? Who's going to win this tournament after this result? Very much intro to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, this is the new map. It's called Corrode. It's got 2 bomb sites, it's got 3 lanes, which is, nothing unusual, right? Like lots of the maps. You hear maps either being designed like boxes, whereby, you have a center part of the map, you have connections either way. Or you could call it like a 3-lane map, which is, pretty much standard in the esports gaming FPS world. So, yeah, 3-lane, 2 spike sites. We'll see what its kind of, if anything, its special feature is. Whether the track that we saw the other day has anything to do with it. Whether there's a train that's going to come along, I don't know. But, yeah, this is just another angle of that new map. Looks, honestly, I don't know. I like the aesthetic of it anyway. Whether it's going to play well, I guess we'll see. So, certainly some of these teams will be looking forward to having some new maps in the pool, I would imagine. This is just a quick article here from Riot on what's changing after Champions 2025. So they've got the schedule in place for October to December. Of course, Champions towards the end of December, start of October. Then Ascension, of course. And they've got a couple of other tournaments happening. The Soup VALORANT League. You've got the Game Changers World Championship towards the end of November. And then there's another couple of tournaments in there as well that we'll get to in a second. So, yeah, these are the dates of the Ascension tournaments towards the end of the year. The 26th of October in EMEA, 26th of October in the Americas, 19th of October in the Chinese side, which, it's always the case, I don't know why, that they do it like a week earlier. And then it's Bangkok for the Pacific. Now, just to make this very clear for you guys, if you are a current team who made it to the Pro League via Ascension, then you need to do this in order to keep your spot. So it's actually not easy, really. Like, if you qualify for champs, you extend for sure. But, like, qualifying for champs is not easy. G2 have done it, fair play. They're still an Ascension team, right? They're still a guest team in this league. So, if things went dramatically wrong, they would be relegated. That's not going to happen, though. They're going to qualify for champs. They're going to extend their stay. Now, if you tick any of these 3 boxes, you give yourself a chance to still stay in the Pro League. I think you'll go down to effectively play, like the Ascension winner, I imagine, will qualify, maybe 2nd place in Ascension or something. You'll play like a playoff, basically, to see whether you go down or whether you can stay in. But if they qualify for Stage 2 playoffs but fail to qualify for Champions, so that's like a key point. So if you're good enough but not quite good enough, like if you're top 8 in Champions points but fail to qualify for Champions, you just got to be top 8 out of 12, and you get the chance to defend your spot. But if you don't, and also if you, let's say 2 Ascension teams qualify for Champions and you were the lower one, then you would have to still face off, but that's very rarely, if ever, going to happen. But if you don't place in any of these positions, you simply get automatically relegated after 1 season. So if you come in at a 9th, in your first season in the league, you're getting relegated. Like, nothing you can do about it. You're just disappearing again. And this has been the rule now for some time, but they're finally, like, really listing it out and how it looks like. They've got the partner series at the end of the year again. We've got the Red Bull Homegrounds in the middle of November, the Soup VALORANT League at the start of December, and then there's this Project Blended tournament across EMEA. So, there were some things happening in the off-season. It's, maybe not as much as we would like it to be, but we'll see what happens in due course. And let's talk about Toronto, right? Because these have been the big storylines of the last few days unfolding in front of our very eyes. And this is Boaster and Crashies, of course, having a good time. And who knows how far they can go in the tournament right now. But before we get there, we've got to talk about what happened in the winners bracket side. Is this finally Paper Rex's tournament to get over the line in, right? Because they did a great job against Wolves. It was actually a really competitive series again. I kind of presumed it would be this way. Wolves are a difficult team to beat right now, but they did get the job done. Crazy to look back on when, they made that comeback on Pearl to beat DFM, and they've made this run all the way through, and now they look like a team that, is certainly the favourites to go on to win the entire tournament. They've barely dropped a map, right? And actually, we'll have a look at that real quick. Yeah, they went 2-1 versus Liquid in the Swiss stage after losing to Gen.G. And after that, they've not lost a single map in the tournament. Yeah, the Lotus was close here, 14-12 on the Lotus. But after they won that one, then it felt like, they were going to get over the line on the Ascent. And that, of course, they did, starting on the defensive side, 13-8 on that, on Wolves' pick. And they go on to make the grand finals, right? So, what a result from Paper X. Wolves deserve a lot of credit. They're still in the tournament. But as FNS, my boys just stay winning, right? The momentum that they've gathered in recent weeks has been mesmerizing. And look, they're now in the finals. They're in prime position to go on to win the entire tournament. Whether they'll do it is still a bit of a different question. But FNS is really excited about it, right? Watching Paper X and supporting them, as he says, please give me a booth for the grand final. Like, I'm trying to make something happen. Jing even says that they don't give you a booth to watch it. I'll give you my seat to play it if you want for the grand finals. So, yeah, no problem about that. I thought the reaction here was kind of funny. Of course, Forsaken, Divide, everyone were enjoying the victory, and they now have a day off, really, to watch what happens in the losers bracket and watch very attentively to see, okay, what do the winners do? What decisions should they make in the grand finals when it comes to map vetoes? And that could be a particularly interesting one. I thought it was pretty cool as well that Alex mentioned here, I don't really use Instagram much for Valorant stuff, but he mentioned how the fact that our organization believes in us and is told to take as long as we need to figure things out, give us lots of security, and allows us the opportunity to work on our game, because it wasn't long ago that people were looking at PaperX and saying, yep, these guys, they're probably past it. It looks like, they might need to blow it up, basically, and decide that, yeah, maybe a change is necessary, the time has come. But no, they decided that they thought there was still some life in this team and they just needed to turn a bit of a corner, and that's what they did, and obviously the rest is history since then. So definitely other organizations maybe could take notes from some of those ideas. But yeah, Sufat BB was kind of calling out Boostio and was like, look, I want to match up with you next. And that's, of course, exactly what happened, as we'll get into this series in just a second, right? Because Fnatic versus G2 was a fascinating series. It was always going to be very competitive. I thought that G2, would win, potentially. I thought they were the slight favourites, but I do know that lots of people, they saw the map pool for this series, and they kind of changed their mind to some degree, right? Because there were, well, let's just say the Lotus pick was interesting, and as we see, G2 banned Ascent, and then they picked Lotus into Fnatic. So there were a couple of options here that they could have gone for in the map vetoes. I'm not sure picking Lotus was necessarily the right idea. Now, picking Ascent, some teams don't like to pick Ascent because then their opponent starts on the defensive side and it puts them in a difficult spot. Sure, I get it. But picking Lotus into Fnatic didn't really seem especially wise. And sure, it was actually very competitive, and at the time it was 10-9. But then Fnatic got out and closed over the line because, Fnatic are really good at Lotus. It's one of their absolute best maps. So for G2 to pick it into them, I thought was definitely a decision. And yeah, not one that maybe we should have expected. Chronicle just had a great performance here, 27-13. Alpha was 25-14. They were loving life. And then they played a split, which Fnatic picked into them, and it was actually very back and forth again until the second half, where Fnatic kind of ran away with it on the defensive end. So again, this is a really interesting moment for G2 as a franchise, as a team. Yeah, they're going to be at Champions, no worries about that. Maybe they can get over the line at the big one. But still, it's now a very consistent trend where G2 turn up to an international tournament and they don't play as well as they, could or should have done. And we're now seeing, yet again more evidence of that here. As G2 said, Sentinels owners have a rival, VALORANT and Boostio. But as Sentinels say, worry about owning that trophy first, right? Because you guys are on a flight back to America and you're still not got a trophy under your belt. Whereas, of course, Sentinels last year, they won in Madrid. And even there was lots of reaction to this. I thought it was pretty funny, actually, kind of well done for the G2 guys. All the other guys have got He Heart Teho. And then, obviously, Trent has the I Heart Teho thing going on. Because they were great in that meta, right? And maybe that's another conversation to have as well, that it feels like with this tournament now being over for G2, maybe the meta change had something to do with it, and Trent was, the team were not quite the same team as they were over the last few weeks when the meta change was no longer in play and Teho was in the meta as he was. But as Valen says, GG's O2 versus Fnatic. Obviously, Trent was gutted about it as well. Need to be better for next time. And as Boostio goes on to say, no Teho, no golden era, right? And he thought this was all rather funny. So, classic Boostio, just pure hate tweet. You got to respect it on some level. But the Sentinels made an account, the Boostio account getting into it, talking about G2 and the golden era that, of course, is not to be. And, things all falling short with Teho out of the lineup, and whether anything's going to change for G2 from now to the rest of time, who knows? Because they won the kick kickoff, second in Bangkok. They won stage 1, fourth in Toronto. Champions, of course, is the next step for these guys, but it's, not been a great sign so far. And yeah, maybe if they'd have made it all the way, would they have won? Of course, losing as they did early on in the tournament, and then, just fourth is pretty rough. I know that it's losing to Fnatic, and maybe Fnatic go on to, make a crazy run, but still, it's not like G2 got especially close to winning the championship this time. They're clearly still a couple of steps away when it comes to these big international tournaments. So G2 are gone. Sentinels are gone, the Americas representation is over. The representation of the other regions, though, is very much still alive. Fnatic Wolves today, and then Paper X versus the winner of that tomorrow in the grand finals. This, of course, a best of 5. Yeah, Fnatic are going to be the heavy favourites for this series, and it makes perfect sense. Can Wolves win it over a best of 5? That is probably the question, right? Because best of 3s up until now. The best of 5, I think, makes it even more challenging for Wolves to potentially win, so I'm expecting Fnatic to get the job done. I'll give Wolves a map in this series. I'll say 3-1 Fnatic, and then if that comes to be true or false or whatever, we'll talk about the implications tomorrow. But very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.